And we are back on May 13th, 1985. Philadelphia's MOVE organization faced a devastating police assault, resulting in the deaths of 11 people, including 5 children, and left hundreds homeless. The tragic event, which was broadcast live and made international headlines, has long been overshadowed and neglected in public memory. Our guest today is an insider with a unique perspective on this forgotten story. His story is chronicled in a new compelling memoir that not only revisits the MOVE bombing, but also sheds light on systemic racism, police brutality, and the fight for human rights. Joining us is author Mike Africa Jr. Mike, good to have you back.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you. And for people who may not be so familiar with MOVE, just let's walk through MOVE before we get to that fatal day.
The MOVE organization was founded by my great uncle, John Africa. He started the organization with the mission to protect life, people, animals, and the environment. And having that mission, he ran across a lot of adversity similar to what the Black Panthers faced when they started talking about fighting for equal rights and civil liberties, same as Dr. King, Malcolm X, and all the others.
Yeah.
And so the MOVE organization met the same issues.
I used to tell people that when it came to MOVE, we're very familiar with PETA and the PETA organization. But long before PETA, there was MOVE actually making a difference out there.
Absolutely. The MOVE organization and the animal rights front definitely predates PETA. I don't know if PETA was inspired by MOVE, but I know that the MOVE organization got a lot of attention for the protests that they did at the Philadelphia Zoo and against Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus, and even furriers that were cutting the fur off of animals and putting them on people's backs. So definitely MOVE predates a lot of those organizations.
Yeah. And so now, Mike, you decided to write this memoir, really detailing the organization, your parents, the work that's gone on. Why did you decide that it was time to write this memoir?
To be honest with you, I decided to write this memoir because it had never been done. No one had ever written a book about MOVE from our perspective. Ramona Africa was the person that survived the bombing, and she spent 7 years in prison. And during the time that she was in prison and her 30 plus years home from prison, she never wrote a book about the MOVE organization. My aunt, who wrote John Africa's guidelines for him since he was pretty much illiterate, she did not write a book about the history of MOVE. And it was kind of like the story of Dory Miller. If you're not familiar with Dory Miller, he was a cook on a naval ship. And during the war, his fleet was being attacked by kamikazes from Japanese airships. And he found himself on the gun firing and shooting down kamikazes. And if he had not done that, we might all be speaking Japanese. But when he was asked the question, why did you get on the gun? You are a cook. How did you wind up shooting? And he said, I did what had to be done. And that's how I feel about this book. We complained as MOVE members, we complained about the unfair treatment we got in the media, the disparities. The media didn't treat us right. They didn't tell the truth about what happened. And here we are with the opportunity to tell the truth, and we never did it in a book form. So I decided that it should be done, and therefore I did it.
Yeah. So for people who may not be so familiar, take us back to that day and the day of the bombing.
Well, the bombing was a lead up from what happened 7 years earlier. The city of Philadelphia and MOVE clashed because of the protests, because of the mayor, Frank Rizzo, and his treatment of black people and poor people in the city. And, the clash led to a verbal confrontations, jail sentences, and then eventually a physical confrontation where Philadelphia police officers came to MOVE's house. They raided the house. They shot tear gas, water cannons from the fire department, bullets, and then they took a bunch of people to jail, including my parents. During the shooting, a cop was killed, and my family was blamed for it. My parents, including 7 other people, were sentenced to 100 years in jail. The other MOVE members that were on the street were protesting to get my parents and the other people freed from prison. And the city's response to the protesting that Move did was to drop a bomb on them. So on May 13th, 1985, they flew a helicopter over the house. They shot 10,000 rounds of ammunition at this house, which is a row house, which is a resident in a residential neighborhood, which is surrounded by hundreds of other houses. They dropped the bomb. The bomb ignited a fire. They decided to let the fire burn. And at the end of it, 11 people were dead, including 5 children.
For yourself, what was you know, the biggest moment for you in terms of looking back that day, remembering what went on? Talk to us about your most vivid takeaway there.
I saw the smoke. I saw the fire as it was happening. And I knew everybody that was in the house. While you see it happening, you don't really know what's happening. You don't really know who's in the house. You don't really know if they're going to survive or not. And the biggest takeaway for me was the city of Philadelphia dropped a bomb. I don't know any police. I don't know if other police departments in the country have access to C4. I don't know if other police departments around the country have access to armor-piercing anti-tank guns or 50 caliber machine guns. The type of artillery that was used against Move was weapons of war. And I've seen the Rambo movies, I've seen the violent movies where people are fighting and they're shooting and all of these things are happening. But to see it happen to my family, knowing that they were just fighting to free the people that were in prison. And, I know that the lifestyle of Move was different than most people. Raw food is popular now, but it wasn't back in the 80s. Dreadlocks are popular now, but it wasn't back in the 80s. And then Move wasn't always so kind to the neighbors with the bullhorn blaring at 2 o'clock in the morning, yelling for their prisoners to be freed. But to see a bomb drop, to see people burned alive and shot as they're trying to flee from a burning building, I thought that was a little much. I didn't think the punishment fit the crime.
Yeah. Talk about punishment and crime. Your parents, about 40 years in prison, and you had to go without your parents for about 40 years in prison. How do you make the transition to live life without parents for 40 years, knowing the work that they did, and then yet and still the work that they did, and how they had to really just suffer these consequences for being a community advocate?
Yeah, it's really hard to accept that as a result of you trying to make a better way, your life ends up harsher, harder than it should be, harder than it needs to be. But I guess that's the cost of doing business in this society. You protest and you try to go against the status quo, and there are consequences for that. And my parents understood what that was going into it. And as a person that was raised in the organization, in a revolutionary group around so many others that are similar, I know a lot of Black Panther Party members and their children. I know a lot of members of the Civil Rights Movement and their children. So we all went through this thing together. So you understand that these are consequences. Is it fair? No. Would you like for things to be different? Yes. But this is what it is. So until we get these changes, where we can have fair treatment with the justice system, a lack of racism in our communities, no disparities, where we won't have to fight for DEIs and affirmative action. Until we reach those points, we're going to face these consequences.
Yeah. And so how do you work to create the awareness for people about the legacy of both your parents, the organization? You've got this memoir out there. What are you hoping that people are actually going to take away after reading this?
The takeaway from me, well, there are two takeaways. One is that we really need to deal with this thing called qualified immunity. I think the biggest injustice in this whole thing with the bombing of Move is that none of the people that were involved in dropping the bomb, letting the fire burn, shooting 10,000 rounds of ammunition, none of them were ever punished. There's never been one minute of jail time. None of them felt the cold handcuffs on their wrists. They never saw the back of a paddy wagon. And I think that that is so unfair and it's such a terrible example to set for other people. I think that if you and if anyone, I don't care who you are or where you're from, if you took a helicopter and flew it over somebody's house and dropped a bomb and tried to and then shot at them as they tried to leave a burning building, you'd never see the light of day again if you live to see to be able to see again. And I think that for police to be able to get away with this type of agreed, I mean, children were shot as they tried to leave a burning building by police officers. And so the takeaway should be we should not allow law enforcement to commit these types of crimes and then officials, protect them. And that's not an attack on the law enforcement community. That's a protection for the citizens in the community. We should, hold police officers to a higher standard. They're there to protect us, and they shouldn't be there to shoot us down.
Yeah.
The other takeaway, though, I think that throughout this whole process, there's a story of myself in trying to make sure that I maintain a level of sanity. It's really hard to live life, period. But without your parents and with abuse happening all around you, you have to develop a thick skin and a clear understanding of how to be happy and take care of yourself. And so there's a lot of people out there that might feel unconfident, they might feel hopeless at times, but just know there's a lot of people out there that are overcoming the obstacles and overcoming the adversity, and I'm one of them. It would not be a surprise if Mike Africa Jr. ended up in jail or a drug addict or a murderer, but I'm not. I've made it to this point, and that's because I understand that happiness is a choice, and I want to inspire people that are struggling with these issues to be happy.
But how has this impacted you, Mike? Because when you talk about your parents, the bombing itself, reliving their prison sentence, I've often said on this show, if a person is incarcerated, it's not just that person that's incarcerated, it's the whole family that's incarcerated. There's a whole lot of people that have been impacted, and for yourself, that's times two, right? Now you've got the bombing, you've got your parents, you've got the justice, the component of there is no justice because we've seen bombs, we've seen this, and no one has been held accountable. So the question is, what kind of long-term impact has this had, other than turning you into a great voice and a spokesperson and an advocate? What kind of impact has this been?
Oh man, I've been through my depression days. I've been through my anger days. When I was a kid, I used to dream about being older so that I could go out and kill the people that killed my family. I used to wish God gave me the gift of speed so that I could speed up my life so that I could be an adult and buy weapons and kill the people that killed my family. And at a certain point, I realized that wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't solve anything. And that the best opportunity that I have to make a change is to be the best person that I can be and try to, exemplify the type of behavior, the type of person that I thought that these people should be. And I have my personal struggles with, like I said, depression and anger, but I believe that happiness is a choice, and that choice comes with creating and building the foundation for the happiness that you want, and then working toward it. And even though I have these things in my mind, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about my family members. But I think that since they did not get a chance to live their life out, I think it would be doing a disservice to them, and it would be very disrespectful to those children who didn't have a choice for me to be dissatisfied and unhappy, not taking the opportunities in life to be happy when they didn't get a chance to be happy. So I think about them in this regard. And I think about all the people that might be dealing with some of these other issues that I might be able to help with my story.
So when we talk about your story, it's going to go down, as in history. We know that already. It's already historical. But when we think about other stories, the George Floyd story, and then I juxtaposed both of those. When you look at George Floyd and you look at what went on with Move, were you encouraged by what you saw? Were you scared by what you saw, given the fact that it didn't go so well on your side? Were you worried about how the George Floyd movement might have saw a similar result?
I think that, John Africa, the founder of Move, he would say the system is controlled by pressure. And I think that without the pressure of people burning down things and fighting and reacting the way they reacted to the George Floyd killing, I think that Derek Chauvin would still be walking the street right now. And in fact, one of the officers that was a part of the George Floyd killing, it has just been released from prison either today or yesterday. So I think the system hasn't changed much. The fact that Tamir Rice was 12 years old and shot down, this cop shot him before he even stopped his car. And there was no consequences for him. Darren Wilson, who killed Mike Brown, all of these cases came after a Move. No consequences for the police officers, no accountability. And all they have to do is say that they feared for their life, or they were nervous, they were scared, and they get off. With, sometimes the other police officers do fundraisers for them so that during their time of need, they're taken care of. And I think it's a real slap in the face to the community who are supposed to be protected by these people, but are actually being killed by these people. I don't think any changes actually happened for the better at all.
Yeah. Mike, we're down to the last minute in this segment, but I do want to take the time, first of all, to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to share with us your journey. Thank you for being so candid and letting us know. And also thank you for the work that you're doing as being a voice for the voiceless, even still to this day. You had plenty of reason to sit down on the sideline, but the fact is you are in the game full throttle. And just want to thank you for taking the time and doing that. For people who want to get this memoir and get the opportunity to find out more about Move, what do they do?
They can go to www.mikeafricajr.com and press the order button. It's also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you check Barnes & Noble, I was just there. It's in the history section. So you might want to make sure you ask for the history section.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, it's American history and it is world history. Those bombings will go down. We remember that. We remember Tulsa. There's a lot that we can really go back and say we've got history in short order that is painful, but yet at the same time needs to be remembered because in order to know where you're going, you got to know where you came from. Mike Africa, my brother, thank you for coming and being with us, man.
Thank you for having me. See you next time.
Yes, sir. We'll talk soon. And we do have to take a quick break. We'll have more on social justice right after this.